Sanchit, shall we start?
Yeah, you can begin, sir.
Okay, great. Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Once again, we have collaborated with Netflix to bring to you a lively conversation on streamers and how they're changing the game for writers everywhere. Joining us today for this discussion are the minds behind some of the recent and popular Netflix releases, such as Ye Kali Kali Aankhein, Aranyak, and Paglight. So please join me in welcoming them. First and foremost, we have with us Rohit Prakash, who is the director of series at Netflix. He joined Netflix in 2019 and oversees the overall local language content strategy. And prior to this, he's also worked with the Walt Disney Company as a theatrical production consultant. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rohit. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you. It's great to be
Next,
here.
sure. Next up, we have with us Umesh Bisht. Umesh is a screenwriter and director in the Indian film industry with many feature films, web series, ads, and television serials under his belt. Some of its works include the popular Shaitan, A Criminal Mind, and he's worked as a creative and series director for the show Kyunki Jeena Isi Ka Naam. His most recent release is the acclaimed Netflix film Paglight. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Umesh. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. And our next speaker, of course, is Charudat Acharya, an acclaimed screenwriter and director who made his directorial debut with the film Sonali Cable in 2014. His body of work includes shows like Hakikat, Jassi Jassi Koi Nahi, and Crime Patrol. And his most recent release being the popular Netflix series Aranyak. Great to have you on board, Charudat. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me.
And last but not the least, we have with us Anahat Menon, a well-known fiction writer who has contributed to films such as Rules, Pyar Ka Super Hit Formula, and Straight. Some of her other works include Un Hazaron Ke Naam, Hubahu, and Hum Pardesi. Adding to her portfolio of work, she was the writer of the popular Netflix series Ye Kali Kali Aankhein. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anahat, and welcome to the board.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Sure. Thank you so much. All right, then, without further ado, let us kick off the discussion by asking our speakers to give us an inside view into the whole process with which these works were developed for Netflix. Because as I said, a lot of our members are curious about what goes on behind the development of a film or a series for an OTT platform. So, and as they say, like every writer's journey is unique. So let's just begin with asking you what your journey was like for your particular work, and then we can take it from there. So I'll just go clockwise from my screen. Charudat, would you like to begin the discussion?
Yeah. So, you want me to say something specifically about how Aranyak was?
Basically, just give us an overview. Like how it came about from the idea.
Yeah. So, a couple of years back, actually, normally what happens is I write mostly crime and stuff like that. So, normally there's some incident or a plot, that first strikes you, because crime stories tend to be plot heavy and stuff like that. But this is one of those stories which came through from a character. Like a couple of years back, I was in Himachal Pradesh, and my wife and my kids were little that time. So we had gone for a trek on these horses, and there we had a problem with those ghodawalas. So we had to make a complaint to the cops, and there was this lady who was taking up a maths tuition of her daughter and shelling peas and wearing one oversized Gharelu sweater. And I was asking her that I need to meet the chief inspector to make a complaint. And she made my wife comfortable, got pakodas, this, that. And then she went and sat on the inspector's desk. She was the inspector. And then she took the case and she really bashed the shit out of those guys and got them to, told them that you guys are cheating Himachali tourists. She was like completely a different character, and the kind of conversation she was having with my wife was like, "Tumhare ghar ka size kitna hai? Do you live with your in-laws?" It was very woman to woman kind of thing. And I was fascinated by this character. And I thought that, we see all these cops who pull out guns and, from helicopters and this, but this is one lady who has come up from sports quota. I spoke to her a little bit more to know about her. Because as writers see, this is like an opportunity. You see a character like this, you don't want to let go of her, or him. Her name was Kasturi, by the way. So that was my little yeah. So then that character I wrote down with my co-writer called Old Monk, and Old Monk and me we wrote this. We wrote down this thing, and then same time we had a driver, who was psyching my kids out, and he was telling me that those forests on top. This is all happening in Himachal. Then those forests on top. There is this creature who lives there. They were asking if there is a yeti out here. They were very fascinated by yeti. He said, "है ना ऊपर रहता है वो तो आधा ये है क्या कहने का तेंदुआ है आधा आदमी है एंड वो बच्चे लोग को खास उसको पसंद है एंड वो जो जूसी जूसी बच्चे होते हैं उनको खा जाता है इधर खरगोश टाइप जो होते हैं माय यंगर वन वाज लिटिल चबी so they were having a ball so all this was coming and then there was one real life case of a girl who had gone missing and there was a plot around it so there's a Hidimba temple there I'm lying down there a little high on so on life so I'm like looking at the sky and thinking what if these three stories came together and that was then I went back and just wrote down that they are completely unrelated. There's a character of a cop in a small town. There is so basically trying to explain that a writer's process can be different, But for me, this was one epiphany kind of moment. Like, why not just bring these three together? These two were from Himachal. These two were connected with Himachal. That case was something else, but that was what professional expertise gets it in. You feel that okay, case to rahega. Case is not that. Cases are many, but you need that something unique. So that's how the first few pages of the story were born. Mostly, yeah.
So it was based on a roughly of these real life incidents that you had. That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
This is the real life incident, not the case. The case is the story itself is fictional.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting because when I saw Ramina's character Kasturi bashing up people, I was initially a little taken aback. I was like, "Aisa hota hai kya? Matlab aati thappad and stuff." But then now they were saying that it's based on a real character.
Oh, yeah, she had kept a danda behind her back, and they were shivering when they came because they knew she would start beating them up. And no, nothing said. The minute they came, they upar se niche aa rahe the, say, mat maro, and she started. She was puny, 5 feet 2 inch tall, Dogra female, but tough female. And she whacked them. First, she whacked the shit out of them. Then she started talking to them. So yeah.
Wow. So you had this idea. You developed it into a 2 or 3 pager, like you said.
Yeah.
After that, like, how was it? Like you collaborated?
I wrote some more, developed a plot, developed stuff. Then Rohan Sippy is my friend and colleague with whom I've done some work before. So I bounced it off to them, and then we thought, okay, chalo isko likhte hai. So we started developing it, and then we kept developing it, and then eventually all the other processes of production came in. This, that, and finally Sid Roy Kapoor came in, and then obviously Netflix came in, and then it just got wings, So from that kind, yeah.
So it was conceived as a web series from the start that we are going to have.
Yeah, absolutely, as a web series.
Very nice. Awesome. So lots of new revelations in the origins of Aranyak.
Yeah.
And cool.
Especially the co-writer has been officially acknowledged.
Huh?
I said the co-writer has been officially acknowledged.
Yes. I without him there is no me. He's the writer. I am the co-writer.
Amazing. So, Umesh, would you like to tell us about your process? How did you come about with Buglight?
Yeah. So, it's a bit of a strange story because things were not very, very nice at one point of time in life, and I was actually grieving my mother's loss. Just lost my mom, and so suddenly for me, I just kept thinking about death and loss, questioning things, and so I spent a lot of time just thinking about that subject. But then I also recalled the period when I had to do all that, Karam Kand jisko bolte hain, so till the Terevi. And somewhere I realized that there is no emotion as strong as loss or love or even joy, happiness, such strong emotions which can be sustained over a long period of time. So they hit you like mad, and then after some time things just come back to normal. So when people come for और खासतौर से इंडिया में तो ये बात है कि आप खुशी में जाओ ना जाओ दुख में जरूर जाना होता है. So when you lose someone, the entire family, everyone comes. And तो 1 घंटे 1.5 घंटे के बाद जब जो टिपिकल क्वेश्चंस होते हैं वो खत्म हो जाते हैं कि कैसे हुआ, ये कैसे हुआ, और हमने तो सोचा भी नहीं था, बहुत जल्दी चले गए. After all those things are over, then life just turns back to normal and gossip starts. And बड़े मजे मजे की बातें होने लगती हैं, और लोग एक्चुअली भूल जाते हैं कि किसी की डेथ पे आए तो हंसी मजाक भी होता है, चुटकुले उठके होने लगते हैं. एंड शाम को जैसे पगलैट में कुछ जैसे पप्पू ताया जी वगैरह शाम को छत पे भी चले जाते हैं, मतलब अपने को राइटर्स से मिलने, अपने दोस्तों से मिलने. सो वो भी एक माहौल होता है. तो when I started thinking about it, मुझे लगा ये तो यार बहुत मतलब मजे का एक माहौल है. And I still remembered, I was in Delhi University in KM College, and when I actually understood what death was, in the sense that it was the first time I lost one of my very close relatives, who was my uncle. And हमारे पिताजी के छोटे भाई थे वो, तो he was very dear to the family, and he was a very happy and very good looking, and he was very good to us kids, so we all used to love him. And we lost him, and that was the first time when I saw matlab kya hota hai. And so I saw my chachi, his widow, at that point of time. And my dad was the eldest in the family, and he was sort of looking after everyone. And his first basic concern was that how do we ensure that this young widow is empowered enough to take care of herself. And my aunt was not she was educated, but she was not very highly qualified, and it was difficult to get jobs. But my father suddenly he asked her that would you like to do a job. And no one had asked her this question ever. मतलब सवाल ही पैदा नहीं होता था उस टाइम पे. ये बात ही होती थी कि नहीं नहीं अब घर की औरतें काम नहीं करती. And she was taken aback, but she was a tough lady, and she said, if someone will give me a job, I'll do it. So fortunately at that point of time my father was well placed, and he was in the government services, so he approached people in my uncle's organization only, and he was able to get her a job. So I saw that whole thing, and when my aunt actually got that job, I saw how the whole family transformed. In fact, their living standards actually went up after she started earning, because she was pragmatic enough to understand which things are necessary, which things are required for the family. And you don't save 80% of your income, you save that much which will only secure your future. So that way she was much more practical, and she ensured that the kids were getting good education. So I saw this story in my aunt, and so all these scenes started coming back to me, but I was still very skeptical to write down. But I was just वो बोलते हैं ना कि if you have an intent, then ideas come to you. So this idea was like knocking at me that will you work with me, will you work with me. So I did just started writing something, and it's magical. आपको समझ नहीं आता है कि आप क्यों कर रहे हो. आप एक एक्सपीरियंस से गुजरते हो, बहुत सारे एक्सपीरियंस होते हैं, बट ये थोड़ा डिस्टर्बिंग एक्सपीरियंस के बारे में मैं नहीं लिखना चाहता था, बट आई हैड टू सिट डाउन एंड जस्ट राइट. And because there was everything in it, I saw the tragedy, I saw the drama, I saw the comic moments, and I just thought, what if I start with a sort of a the initial thought or a log line or whatever is a young widow who is unable to cry. So this line just came to me, and once this line came to me, then I started slightly developing. And again, like Charu, I was like very, very fascinated with the crime genre. I had worked with a lot of entertainment education. I had done a lot of stuff in the crime. So I had a script which I thought was very good, and I was I was very, very keen to do this film, and I had spent 2 years of my life just writing that screenplay. And the political atmosphere was changing at that point of time, but I was still pitching my film. And so someone told me, why don't you, a friend actually told, very dear friend, she introduced me to Guneet Monga, our producer. So I went to Guneet's office, and Guneet was leaving for US on that day. And So I pitched this, crime-based story to her, and she heard it for some time and then said, Umesh, I'm no longer producing these kind of films, or working or wanting to work in this kind of a genre. In fact, I don't want to make Hindi films. I'm moving to US. So I said, ठीक है, इनके अमेरिका के साथ हमारी पिक्चर भी गई इनके साथ. तो I said, ठीक है, फिर चाय वाय पीते हैं, let's मारो गप. And we just started, gossiping. And Guneet is a very warm person. वो दिल्ली वाली है, तो मतलब आराम से हम लोग दिल्ली की बात करने लगे. And बात करते करते मैंने ऐसे ही बोला, एक आइडिया पता नहीं दिमाग में चल रहा है यार, लेकिन लिखना शुरू नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ, क्योंकि मुझे नहीं लगता कि कोई इंटरेस्टेड भी होगा, क्योंकि सुनने में लगता है कि बहुत डार्क ट्रेजिक आइडिया, कि क्या आइडिया. सो आई जस्ट नरेटेड same things which I told you guys, and suddenly the energy of the room changed, yeah? And Guneet started narrating her own experiences, and she said, this can you write something about it? How much time will it take? 6 months, whatever. I said, yeah, it sounds, after talking to you especially, it is sounding more exciting to me also. So I said, give me some time and I'll come back with the first draft of a screenplay. So Guneet went to US and I decided to come back to Delhi and to write the script. And it was such a sort of an organic process that once I sat down to write, for me it was like watching a film and just writing it down. So it was like listening to, I was just the Ganesh listening to Vyas and just writing the Mahabharata. So मैं बैठ करके लिखता चला गया, क्योंकि मैं दिमाग में आ रहा था, वो सीन्स जीवंत थे, दिख रहे थे, पर्दे पे जैसे देख रहे. Because of our some kind of a formal training in script writing and filmmaking, we were very aware of the process. So while the process was there, but this thing was happening very organically. And believe me, in 2 months, I just came back with the first draft of the screenplay, which was unimaginable. It's like, so I was obviously writing like mad, and ek junoon mein likh raha tha. And again, when I went to Guneet, she thought that us din bhi wo, matlab, she was going to go to US and things. So she was very frequently traveling those days. And she thought that I've just come to touch base and say hi and all. So we kept talking, and then she said, Acha, I have to go to the airport. And so what's happening to the screenplay? I said, wahi to sunane aaya tha. She said, what, have you written it down? I said, haan, likh liya, pehla draft ho gaya. And she said, okay, I just have very limited time. How much time will it take? I said, 2 hours, 2 ghanta to lagega. So she said, okay. And she heard the draft. And she was completely, sold, and she really liked it. And she had very nice things to say about it. And then once she said that we are doing this film. So from that first draft, it's another story that it took me 1.5 years, to write the second draft and to finally arrive at the final shooting draft. But yeah, so this was a very interesting process for me.
And like Charudat, it was also based on a real life experience which stuck with you. And
absolutely, like Martin Scorsese says, the more personal it is, the more creative it is. So that really works, because I have also tried writing things which are beyond my experiences and have not been very successful. I've just because of the skill, I've been able to sell that work, but in my heart I know that that product is really not what I would have really want to write. So the
right.
once your personal experiences are there, your your fiction becomes more real and relatable. So
that's a very good point, and I'll actually come back to that, because we have received questions regarding this also. So hold that thought, please. And now we'll shift to Anahat. Anahat, what did you witness that made you Anahata, sorry. What did you witness that made you write Ye Kali Kali Aankhein?
I mean, I cannot tell you a very fascinating story about it, but the truth is that, Kali Kali Aankhein, the seat of the idea was kind of came up 20 years back, over 20 years back. And me and Goldie and I go many years back. Siddharth Sengupta was the director and creator of the show. And he and I used to meet up a lot to keep talking about stories between us. I was writing, we both had different things going on, but we keep meeting to just talk about some ideas, and this was one of those ideas that we just kept returning to all the time, but somehow it just didn't fit into the milieu of programming at the moment when it was mostly television. And it seemed a little too erratic somehow it was not fitting in at any good time. So it never happened. But we never stopped talking about it. And it was originally also a story which was set in this kind of like the basic idea was there, but it was an urban story. It was set in a totally different milieu. So over the years, we discussed it many times. It never really took off. Then, I went off, I got busy with other things. And ultimately, when, this Netflix opportunity came up, it was really then when the idea started really coming together, because we suddenly knew that this can be done. I mean, this story can be told in the way we want to tell it. And, it seemed like the right time. And somehow everything kind of came together. The world became quite different from what we had actually started with. And it just fitted in better. And, Charu was saying, the ideas just got wings from there on. It really developed really fast from there. Fast, it was still slow, but fast in a sense, not like compared to 20 years. Yeah, but so
and what was this? Awesome. So, and what was your setup like? Because I believe Charu was the series writer for Aranyak, so he was the only writer there. Paglight was a film. In your case, there was a story writer, a screenplay writer, and a dialogue writer, right? So, was it like a writer's room, or was it more like?
It was like a writer's room. It was like a writer's room. So, what happened was that we would, because whether it was the series story or the episodic story, there were a bunch of people who would kind of take it apart, see how to design it, and then ultimately, everyone does their own thing. So the vision was, we worked that out in the writer's room.
All right. Nice. Okay, so now coming to Rohit, please tell us, like, how does it...
but thank God it didn't come from my personal experience.
Yeah, that's what I was really curious about. I was hoping you would continue the trend, but yeah. No, but it's nice because, like you said, like the idea wasn't fitting with TV programming and it wasn't fitting with a movie, but with the coming of Netflix, you got a medium to finally express it, So, Rohit, what is your opinion on this? Like these projects, all three of them distinct works, all three of them with different origins. So how do you go about it? Like, because a lot of our members are curious, how does the filtering process happen? How do you select something? So could you just tell us about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, it's not scientific, so to speak. You do initially by what you really like, what stands out for you. And then as a creative executive, it's my job then to fight for it if I need to, and say that I want to get this made because I believe in this story. Or I believe in this script, I believe in the creators. And there is a fair bit of, we need to convince people why sometimes, and that's a good round of questioning that we had inside, like, what is it, where do you think it'll land, where is it going to go, what kind of people do you want, etc., etc., what genre do you think it'll be, what audience do you think it'll attract. But there is the process of filtration starts with what you end up liking a lot, because when I like something, that's when I'll be like, I want to get this made and let's figure out how I can do that. It's not that easy when you don't like something. You don't really have the motivation for it. We are a little mindful now in this process of, is there something similar that we ourselves are developing? Because we're a bunch of creative executives between films, unscripted and scripted, and licensing and looking at competition, that are we as differentiated? Because a service like Netflix or any other platform has a limited number of shows, movies, unscripted content that it will make. And each of those need to stand out in their respective category, what it is. So we are extra mindful of, do I have something which is, the documentary team is making something similar because I've taken a live thing? Or is there something from the original films team that they may also be making something on grief, and we also have something on grief which revolves around a recently widowed or a young mother, or however it is, are there overlapping themes? So we try and make sure it's differentiated, it's segregated. And if you've heard things are also being developed in the industry and all this stuff, we try and keep a lot of that in mind before we figure out how to choose. But we get like maybe 1,000 things a year. We'll be making in series, we'll be making 15, 20, depending on how it lands. So the selection process does get narrowed down. The good thing is we have a lot to choose from, but it also takes time to go through it and then to take a call and then move with it.
Got it.
Yeah, like I mean,
Right.
for Aranyak was a project that I had worked on. So for me, when that came in, it was ready-made. As in, the scripts were written out. We felt that it had to have certain things for Netflix. But I can tell you from all of these stories and from now my experience, because I was also working in theatrical films, and theatrical films have a very different parameter of what's going to work for that audience, because you need to pull that audience to come in. With Netflix and other OTT platforms, initially it was just like you want people to come in and watch your content. Yes, now we're also thinking like, how is that content going to just pull people in? Like when that trailer goes out, when the idea goes out. But with Aranyak, it stood out like immediately. It was so different from a lot of the other things we've seen. It was so, and I also like dark. I also like crime and horror. I think all of us on this panel just like crime and horror. You just chosen one panel of tick mark 2 boxes on it and got us all together.
Right.
But yeah, and then it was an easy process. Like, you know, discussing with Charu and the team and getting the team together, it was an actually very easy process to kind of be like, okay, the only thing I'll tell you looking at all 3 content is all 3 is very differentiated. And I don't know if those would stand the test on linear TV or this thing. For us, it is that it subverts our expectation of what those stories are. What you expect in Puglet, what you expect in Ye Kali Kali or in Aranya. Like you're surprised that Kasturi is a character who is thappad maar degi. For us, it's just like, oh yeah, that's for us. It's what an interesting character, and look what she is doing now. And we have to get into her story. If she's going to be every other cop that we've seen, then I don't know what an audience and why an audience is going to stick around for 8 episodes to see her do something we've seen so many cops do across the board. Same thing, I think, with the characters of Ye Kali Kali Aankhein and with Umesh's character that Sanya is playing. It's just that you don't expect her to turn around and say, like, why are you guys grieving so much? What's your problem? That's the kind of characters I think that really stand out. They don't have to do it inorganically. Netflix ko ye acha lagta hai, to character kuch bakwas bol dega. But it means that they genuinely are those kind of people. That's, I think, what stands out for us. When you start changing our perception, breaking down those things, because Indians have seen a lot of content from international. We are watching Korean, Spanish, regional languages here, various languages here, and English language content. So everyone is used to a lot of different kind of things. So for that, all of these pieces of content actually stand out. That's what we end up looking for.
Right. So not just distinctness of concept and idea, but also the distinctness of characterization, the protagonist, what is making them stand out in a crowd of other protagonists and similar stories and setups.
Yeah, I mean, look, films can still maybe. I have less experience of films for the OTT and more for like theatrical, but I think in the series space, you can't sustain just on plot. If your character is not interesting enough, you're just not going to pull your audience through for episode after episode after episode based on abhi ye ho gaya, abhi wo ho gaya. They'll get immune to it. So it's always been when the character is managing to change your perception of who they are, and you keep them on that very stark balancing act of they can go either which way. You know, we expect Kasturi to be like, oh, she's a woman, she should be quiet, she should be demure, she should be pretty, and she's a cop, but you know, like Charu said, sports quota, to usko kuch aata nahi, but she actually knows how to do her job, but she has a distinct way of doing it, and that's what's so attractive about that character.
Got it. So again, like a very interesting revelation there, that your character is as important, if not more important, than your plot when you're pitching something for an OTT platform, especially if it's a series. So like I said before, we have three works here today which we are showcasing, and all three of them are obviously distinct in their own ways. The one common factor which I found was the small town setting. So for instance, Paglite and like uh, Aranyak and even Ye Kali Kali Aankhein, they're setting those small towns, and those towns are not just backdrops, okay, for the sake of a backdrop we put it. Those towns, that setting is actually a character in the story. It's lending its own flavor and nuances to the plot. It's actually forwarding it, So it's not like you could have based the story anywhere else. So my question is key, and this is, I'm talking from a member's point of view, that are small town stories in particular more favorable get for a response, like in terms of their mass appeal and relatability, or is it just incidental? It doesn't matter whether your story is based in a small town or a city, or it's just a matter of coincidence. The question is for the entire panel. You please feel free to chime in with your responses.
If I could start, for me, writing Paglat, which I based in Lucknow, which I earlier said, since I wanted to write about the universe with which I was very familiar with. So हमारे लिए लखनऊ वगैरह छोटे शहर नहीं थे. हम जब आए थे तब लखनऊ से तब भी उसको बड़ा ही शहर मानते थे. But we realized, those differences when we came to Delhi. But that was a universe which I was so well aware of. I knew the lingo and I knew the kind of characters, you find there. I knew कि यहाँ की बिरयानी अगर नहीं खानी है, जो कि बहुत अच्छी है, तो आपके लिए हमारे छोले भटूरे भी बहुत पॉपुलर है. So I knew all that, that little minute details of the city and of the characters. So I was not writing or pandering to the fact that Lucknow is considered not a metro city but a small town. But when I was creating that universe, which I was very familiar with, when I went back to relive those experiences, my city had changed. In a lot of ways, new things had come in. So it was very good to me because I experienced that, and I started incorporating those things, those changes, which were sort of pushing the traditional boundaries and occupying more space there. So I started physically getting those spaces into my story. So that was one thing. So basically, if I say that I based the story in Lucknow, it was only because that I was familiar with the universe. I was very well aware of the characters and the lingos, and the new changes which were happening were also lending themselves to my story and my plot. So that's why I wrote and based the story in Lucknow. And even when they go out to Kanpur, which is again very close to Lucknow, and the same ambience. And I wanted to capture the real ambience of जब आप घाट पे जाते हैं तो पंडित, how do they behave? For them, it's a commercial activity. While you are drowning in the grief of losing your son, there is a market around that grief which is already there. So I wanted to capture that, and I'd seen that happen. So I just had to find the right place and recreate. And I think Lucknow and Kanpur gave me that kind of platform. So that was.
So you have lived that experience. So you have lived that experience, which is why it was natural to you to base your story in that thing. It was not a matter of whatever commercial viability or anything like that.
No.
I think even Charu, that like you said, he went through some similar experiences which inspired him to write.
Yeah. But in sharp contrast to what Umesh said, see, I am a Mumbaiker. Okay, when I'm 99% of the times I think of stories that are in Mumbai. I am a strong believer in personal experience. I can't think. I don't feel like telling stories about which I don't know much about. But having said that, this experience was from Himachal, but actually I don't know the nitty-gritties or the what we call as the detailing and the bariki of either the policing system is what I just had that exposure. But I'm a very, very urban Mumbaiker, that too lower middle class and middle class specialist, of Mumbai. That's my forte. What I've grown up with, I know the city like the back of my palm. But that was a different experience. But what I would say is that the story demanded it. I mean, Aranyak is forest. Aranya is forest. Aranyak is from the forest. It was a. But what I can say is personal experiences. I follow my kids a lot. For me, the institution of family, of midlife crisis in marriages, which are all coming from our own experiences around us. A very close friend has lost a child. So these experiences, if we can bring them, and the idea was not to make a culturally specific Himachali show set in Himachal, but something that is plausible in that place, and yet the emotions have to be, universal. The experiences have to be emotional, have to be universal. So that's the reason. So it was a challenge for me. It was a challenge for me. So many times I used to call up some of my small town pals and asking, यार यहाँ पे ऐसा हो सकता है क्या? मतलब यहाँ पे ऐसा हो सकता है क्या? So and they used to say, "Hi, yaar," and there is no one right answer because this India is a very different India. We have an idea about small town, but the world, the net, the internet, and so I wanted to bring in those elements also. How the internet makes all teenagers the same world over. So those are the experiences and things which we. So it was a challenge for me, an interesting time to tell that story. Yeah.
Right, right. Nice. And okay, so coming to Anahata now, like you said, Ye Kali Kali Aankhein, I believe you said that it was initially set in a city. The
It was
original
set
work.
in Bombay, and the story had its potency right from the beginning, and that's why we were very, very interested in it. But I think what the small town context did to the story, I think in the contemporary, when we kind of looked at the story at this point, somewhere we felt that, whether it was the power dynamics, thematically, there were certain things about the story, whether it was the power dynamics, whether it was the reversal of the, man-woman dynamic, which is normally explored of an obsessive man and a girl who is, whatever, either she's traumatized by her or her love stories. The point being that here the tragedy was the man's, and somewhere it was much more potent, set in the context where patriarchy was that much more toxic or that much more solid, where power dynamics were कि गरीब किसी को सरकार बुलाता है, like call someone their master. It doesn't happen in an urban context. So somewhere that whole the things just got kind of enhanced, embellished more with that small town context. And I also feel that given the global reach of streaming platforms like Netflix, it was also a great opportunity to tell a very Indian kind of story with a cinematic drama which was very distinct to the Indian subculture. And I felt like how we encounter stories set in a rural place in Mexico or a rural place in Chile or some place like that, and it is integrated into narratives which are American shows or European shows. We saw it as actually a great element in the style of the show, in the telling of the show. So I mean, I think the color, the whole OTT feel that you could mount in that milieu, it was the opportunities that milieu gave actually for the story to be told better. So that's why we kind of chose that.
So it enhanced and added to the idea which you already.
Fine for us.
Right. Awesome. So, Rohit, I'll just modify the question a bit more because I'll just combine this with a common question which a lot of our members ask, that is there a particular genre or a setting that Netflix prefers, for instance, or does it not matter and it's just about the idea and the protagonist, as you said? What's your take on this?
Yeah, there is no particular genre. I mean, when we are figuring out our slate, it takes 26 to 30 months for a show to come out from the time you start on it. So we are actually planning, like at this stage, we are planning for 2024. We are, we have already like covered 2023 and we're like, abhi 2024 ke liye kya banega? Or just the end of 2023, So a rough calculation, depending on the size of the show, is from the day you start shoot, you should look to launch in a year's time. And in order to write that and get everything in place and the production and all that stuff, it can take 12, 14, 18 months, depending. So it takes a lot of time. I think for us, we're just conscious of, do we have enough diverse stories? Do we have stories? Is everything becoming like it's all modern? Is it all period? Is it all crime? So we are mindful of like, are we just telling a lot of diverse stories to entertain a lot of different types of tastes? We don't have a thing कि ये small town hai, small town हमारे यहाँ चलता नहीं है. It's not like that. So we don't work in that with that filter at all. For us, it'll only be like we have 10 projects which are right now all small town. We're looking at something a little bit urban at this point. So if there's something urban or there's something in this space, because there's a gap. So we may program for gaps that we may have, but we are not getting into dismissing on the basis of it's in this location or that setting. That's not how we look at it.
Okay. So it's just a matter of incidence. Suppose there's a gap. Okay, we don't have any urban romances, for instance, then if there's a story which is fitting that, then obviously it's just a matter of incidence, and you can't predict the trend because, like you said, you're looking at 2024, which is like, who knows what will be trending at that time. So it's just a matter of sticking with your guts and your story. Got it. Great. Thanks, Rohit. That was actually quite helpful, I'm sure, for our members. And coming back to the point which I said, like Charudat and Umesh, you said that your stories were based on your personal experiences. And in fact, you said that without a personal experience, like the personal experience actually makes a story much more, real in that sense. So one interesting question which we got from our members was, suppose if I have not experienced something, like Anahata, for instance, thankfully she has never experienced that setting of her story, but she wrote it, So can you still manage to write a real story or a heartfelt story without going through it yourself? For instance, if my protagonist is a serial killer, hopefully I am not, then how do I go about it?
See, I think when we say that it should come out from your personal experience, we certainly do not mean that that particular character or that particular situation you should have gone through in real life. We don't mean that. What we are trying to say is that it is the emotion which that character goes through and how he handles or negotiates during that situation, that has to be relatable. So if it is about death you're writing, and as a writer, you don't have to go kill someone, and but you have to just understand the deep sense of loss, which I'm sure everyone would have had, and figure that out. So when we are saying a similar, character, we are not talking about, his the physical characteristics or one Mr. X. We are not talking about that. We are talking about a whole sum of internal and external characterization, which you see in a person. And actually, when you sit down to write, even with your personal experiences, so there are different kind of things. Your different personal experiences actually bring something which is completely new, but yet very relatable, because all those small parts are actually based on some kind of a real experience which you have had. So it's not necessary that you have to go through exact X situation. It could be any situation which you can relate to, and then convert it into your experience while you are writing a fictional story. So that's why I say a fictional story which is based on facts and which are relatable emotional experiences. So your imaginary world becomes very, very real for the viewer and for the reader. So that's what is meant when you're writing from your personal experiences.
Yeah. Got it. But I would like to say one thing, that when we talk about personal, when we say I don't have a personal experience of something, see, like for example, Paglet is the writer has lived that time. It is extremely personal. Okay, so he is able to bring in, and what he will try to bring in is all that he has experienced. He doesn't need to look at other material or other other people's experience, because his are rich enough, and that it is the desire to tell your own thing that drives you to do personal stories. But when we look at things like murderers and serial killers or any kind of espionage and a lot of stuff, 99% of the time we have no experience. Our writer has not gone through it, or nor has the audience gone through it. But what we have in front of us is a body of work that has already been done, which comes to the writers as default material. So I think in this case, when we are doing genre stuff, instead of, like in real experiences, you want to put in maximum what you want to do, and that is the only thing you will do, because it is unique. Your experience is unique. Here the challenge is what not to do. When you're doing genre stuff, there is a challenge that, okay, by default now, because we've also watched movies, we have grown up on movies. Serial killer means we think of X, that he must be like this and he must be like this, because these are not, we have not met them. We have not even gone to a prison and met a real serial killer. We have seen 8 great characters on the screen. And they are the serial, or we have read 15 great, we have imagined 15 great serial killers in a novel or some other Netflix show. हम थोड़ी गए, हमको थोड़ी, like if you actually go and meet, see Raman Raghavan's interviews and see his photographs, 99% of times you will never think of him as a serial killer or imagine him to be. So the idea is to break those stereotypes that have been given to us. They're all great, but can we go do a little bit of research into this, find something from somewhere and make him more interesting, more unpredictable, and make them interesting characters? As Rohit had said, na कि अभी serial killer में तो killer का character ही सबसे interesting रहता है. Killing क्या करेगा वो, मतलब वही 4 तरीके से मारेगा, वही चीजें करेगा, वही ट्रॉफी लेके जाएगा, पर उसका मोटिव, उसकी बैक स्टोरी, वो क्या है. So I think that training is something of what not to do and how to do things differently comes in when we work in genre. That's what I feel. Be it love stories, be it various kind of things. प्यार भी 90% लोगों को कहाँ मिलता है प्यार, तभी तो पिक्चर देखने जाते हैं. प्यार लव स्टोरी किसी की होती नहीं है, ना प्यार मिलता है, ना बाहर पे कोई बंदूक नहीं चलाता है, कोई कभी दिल के बाण नहीं चलाता है, तो सब हम लोग पिक्चर में से ही निकालते हैं ना. So that's my take on this.
If I may add, I think at the core of your question, I think what we need to understand is that every subject requires a different set of like it appeals to a writer for a set of reasons. And
Right.
I feel that every subject has its own way, or every story has its own way of wanting to be told by you. And you kind of instinctually follow that guidance from the subject itself. One. The other thing is that I believe that a writer is a storyteller. A storyteller can't live through everything, but a storyteller cannot look away from life. So it is the witnessing and the observance of life, of people, of what makes them do what they do, of what it feels like for something to be done to you. What does it feel like to have something happen around you? Everything is something that you are kind of finding insights with, right? Life is being witnessed by you. And we are millions of stories walking around. All of us are stories. That's why we love stories. It shows us something about
Right.
us.
Absolutely.
So it is that to understand कि वो killer होगा, वो मारेगा, है तो इंसान का बच्चा. So ultimately, as you are also the critic, you're also the one who is kind of disciplining this character. You're also the mother. You're also nurturing this character. He says, "Chal, I understand you. Chal, show me what you do." तेरा क्या पंगा है? So you have to have that, I think, a kind of multi-dimensional relationship with your characters where you have enough distance and you have enough intimacy with them. So it doesn't mean you have to experience everything. Like Purva, I think she's a great character. Do I want her as my best friend? Never. Never.
Yeah.
Very clear.
Scary.
And that's
Scary.
because of my insights in life.
Yeah.
Right? So it's all about the insights we develop. And I feel that's what writers need to develop themselves as people. The story,
Absolutely,
they're all
absolutely.
stories. The story has to develop. The story you're carrying inside you. Only then you're able
Right.
to do that through your work.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that is definitely an illuminating discussion on that. So now let's get into the technical parts of writing as such. So especially in web series, like a lot of our members were curious that suppose you decide the theme and premise of your story, right? How do you maintain it through the 8 episodes that you have to construct, And the second part of the question is, how do I manage the character development during these 8 episodes? Because like I said, it's a fairly new medium. So people are still curious, especially if you're looking at shows which are going to go beyond one season, you know that there has to be an arc after this as well. So how do you manage this? And this question is for Charudat and Anahata, since both of you have written web series. And Rohit, you can give us the evaluation point of view after they're done. So Charudat, let's start with you.
So I would, one see thing is a lot of times you can't do a movie approach to the series because those who have written movies mainly to our long format films. तो उसका अपना एक grammar होता है, उसका अपना एक structure होता है, like you do your 3 acts and there's a linearity to it. On the other hand, if you have been writing soap operas, उसका अपना एक grammar होता है, on television, like a daily soap. So the closest that a web format comes to is the weekly or bi-weekly 45-minute we used to have, like, and some of the great content that we watch on Netflix or Amazon or any other platform are many times great television shows from the different parts of the country, but they have been put together and we watch them together. So in my whatever limited understanding, my thing is that the catchphrase is to how do you engage people to not watch one episode, but get them to binge watch, get them to write it in such a compelling manner that 6-7 hours invest करे एक time में ideal, otherwise over 2 days. Because high वहाँ पे रहता है. When somebody tells you I saw your show, the first thing if they tell you that I binge watch it, it's like, oh yes, that's like I think that worked, So I think in keeping that in mind, developing tracks, you have your A story or a main plot. I think as writers we should really create secondary characters that we care for, because many times we really focus a lot on the primary characters and the primary plot, and accordingly we cast accordingly. But if you have 2-3 other peripheral characters, I mean, I once had read a beautiful quote from some famous person. He said that write such good secondary characters that they can walk into their own primary films or primary stories. Like if they just open and go, like if you followed them, then they would be the central characters of some other story. So I strongly believe that the more you invest in them, give them genuine dilemmas, don't keep them for the sake. Of course, they have to be connected to the main plot or whatever your genre is, but they need to have attitude, they need to have their own agency, they need to have their own agendas in life, own psychological makeup, own issues to battle with. And if as writers we care for them, then the audience will care for them. And that keeps people engaged. So it's not like you are all the time following one trajectory. So if you're telling the story of B and C characters, they're as engaging.
Right.
That for me is something that is a learning, and I've tried to follow it. And somehow, when I observe, I try to learn from other series. You realize that like just look at Better Call Saul.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that.
Just think of Better Call Saul. कहाँ वो first series में he was a lawyer, he was but how he came back, and now you have a full series which is so good, So that's what I feel. So that ability to create एक पूरा गाँव, it's like a novel, right? पूरा गाँव, like when we read novels, when we read chapters of somebody, some who's not the main story, we still read now. We don't skip that chapter now, because if you skip it, then it's not a great novel. You want to know the minor characters. Plot to hai, but I'm saying character. Our investment in them, their take, their worldview. Yeah. So that
got it.
Yeah.
Great. And Anahata, would you like to add in on that?
I would say that when we have ideas, when we think about story, I think when you know which medium you're communicating through, you also have a sense of who you're communicating with. So I feel that we are all television writers with a lot of experience in television, so we understand that it has a different grammar, it has a different listener, viewer, and the same viewer may turn up for the OTT show, the same viewer may go to the theater, but their expectations, as such, when you are telling a film story, there is a certain time frame within which you are building a narrative, whether you're telling it in a linear fashion, whether you're telling it in a poetic narrative, whatever you're doing with it, whether it's experimental, that it is within that time frame. It has only that much bandwidth for communication. I think with television, you kind of want to become part of their lives. You want to say, I'm a mundane too. I'm just part of, just how you, beat your eggs for your omelette. I'm around. Kheer khani hai, some rubbish kind of, narratives are also invented in television, I feel, to, in a sense, make you feel like this is just normal life. This is part of my life. And that illusion is part of that grammar. And when you are, and I think when you are communicating through the streaming platform, the great thing about, I think, this particular time is that your form, your template of telling the story is shiftable, it's malleable, it's dynamic. You can, you can improvise. So I feel that according to the subject, I think OTT is a lot about with how much depth you want to tell the story, with how much, insight do you want to kind of construct your or design your telling. So, and like Charu was saying, that you have to, you don't know, you have to think of the trajectory of your characters as something that has infinite possibilities to give you. That you cannot think of a character having limitations in that sense, that within the narrative and the dynamic of the story plot, you have to see how much can this character, hai, jo OTT mein you want to get as much out of it, because that is what appeals to the viewer, one. And the other thing, what he was saying was about the bingeability, is that I think, just like I said, in television, it's somewhere, it's happy to even be the drone in the room. Quiet, you could be ignoring it also, they don't mind, beyond a point. But in OTT, the engageability has to be extreme. And I feel that changes the grammar totally. There is an immediacy about the telling, which in cinema there isn't, because you're not afraid that yes, you can think, yaar, theater chhod ke na chale jaye log, but log jaate nahi, wo popcorn leke dekh lete hain. But the point is कि और टिकट तो खरीद लिए, बट OTT में ये होता है कि भाई चैनल मत चेंज करना, एक है फिर कि पहले 10 सेकंड में ये कर दो, वो कर दो. There is pressure from many, from yourself too, that you feel that, oh my God, this has to be told in a way that nobody can, the attention doesn't drop. So I feel there are a lot of other factors that come into when you are kind of wanting to tell a story through the streaming format, because the form itself allows for so much of flexibility, and you yourself need to find that flexibility within you to be able to tell the story in a kind of, a diverse template. It's not stuck to one.
But the pressures are similar to television, because the viewer has the liberty to switch off at any time, so there is that.
But I think the pressure is not that bad, because nobody cares you're an appointment. So I've seen, but the pressures are different with television. Just for a writer, I think they just caught up with deliveries. But I think what gives you that is that as a writer, you must find, you must find the ability to go into the depth of things. Otherwise, a story doesn't change you, and you don't make a difference with your story. I feel OTT has that quality where you can make a difference with the story.
All right. Rohit, what's your take on this?
So look, for us, I think, Charu and Anahata actually captured it pretty well. There is a certain thing of bingeability that we also look at. And for bingeability, it just, like, we are very worried about people dropping off and not wanting to go further. So the idea is not to inorganically start plugging things in, ke bomb chhod dete yahan pe, or sure, somebody's dead and all that stuff. That's not the thing. And to be very honest, creative executives are not writers. We are, what we should be, and we try to be, is more like shepherd the creative towards a certain place. I'm sure at times people cross the boundaries, but I apologize for creative executives. But the fact is that we are trying to just figure out, like, are there places which are, is the story holding? Are the characters making sense? Are there tracks and trajectories adding up to what is the promise of it? Are we suddenly are we suddenly dropping the tension in the thing? Is the conflict suddenly over? Are our motivations, are our stakes over there? So there is a lot that we like to see it from there. And our worry is that, like people, I think in television, what I've heard is you measure like how many people started your show and how many people completed your show. We also like to see like how many stuck around till the middle of the show. Like, are they liking it or not? Is there, and that for us is a measurement of how much love do you have for a show? Because otherwise, and I think that's great for a place like Netflix. Instead of, in theatrical stuff, you would look at like, what's your first day number? What's your weekend total? So you're here trying to just figure out like how much are people liking it, and are there places, and from our experiences and sometimes from data that we see like, hey, people dropped off at a certain point. Then the thing is, data can only point you to a place and say, yahan kuch hua hai. We have to figure out like, wo kya hua wahan se, use that learning to apply in our other shows. So that basically is something that we try and be like, hey, there could be an issue here. And many times, many times we are proved wrong because of what an actor or a director is able to do to the treatment of that scene, which you may not be able to visualize. On paper, it may not always come across the way it is in the mind of the creator or the showrunner. So many times, I at least have been proved wrong. But what we try and do is like, we say, can we fix this part where it is going down? Can we see that, there is a cohesiveness to the character, that the tension is there throughout? Am I?
Yeah, I think your video stuck, but we can hear you properly.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, it's perfect now.
Yeah, sorry, my internet connection is a little unstable. So for us, there is a lot that goes into that, and there is a lot of learning. Our first episodes are for us the most important, because that's the one that we know that if people actually like it, then they will get into it, and then they will hopefully stick around and watch all of the episodes. But it doesn't mean that at the first episode ho gaya, to second, third mein kuch bhi kar lo and come back on fourth and let's pick up the pace there. We're constantly trying to monitor like at what places, and for us that journey starts from the writing and ends in its launch, because even on the edit we're trying to see it. And I think one of my showrunners had said like, a show is made 3 times over. It's made when you're writing it, it's made when you're shooting it, and it is made when you're editing it. And I've seen that in a show that is about to launch in a few days, but that the showrun itself took out 10 minutes from one episode saying that this is not making sense, change the tracks around in the edit, because it wasn't becoming cohesive, it was becoming too long. And he himself was so cognizant that I won't be able to hold the audiences because this part is just dropping. Either the performance is off, shot badly, something happened, something went wrong, or realize original writing there was a little bit, it hadn't been thought through. And he took it out. And that's what we are there to ensure, that if they're thinking, doing it, all of that stuff, and they're doing the right part. Like, gusse mein kuch nikala nahi, extra kuch add nahi kiya, and stuff like that.
Got it. Cool. So lots of gyan actually, like from both sides, the streamer side and the writers and creators side coming in. So again, like I believe these, for instance, Charudat said that he had quite a bit of the story ready when he approached Netflix with Aranyak. So another common question which our members have is that, what are the documents that I should have ready with me ideally, or is there any docket that should be prepared when I'm approaching someone with an OTT film or series, So is there any such requirement, or is it just subjective?
Look, I think if you're coming out fresh and you don't know someone in the OTT and everything, it is generally better to have, the more baked and the more fleshed out it is, the better it is to get people to come back with an affirmative answer. I mean, to come back with a very clear answer, whether it is yes or no.
All right.
Because otherwise, I think a lot of people come with a one-pager, and for series, it's like 0.001% of what are we going to actually see. Will you be able to turn this into a 6-8 episoder? Does this have enough material to sustain so much storytelling? So I think that is a question. And for us, we say this to a lot of people, like the more baked it is, the better. Ideally, what we would like, and it's not easy for everyone to do, is that at least write out a story arc, which could be, 20 to 30 pages. I have been impressed with 6 pages, but I've been impressed with 6 pages of the person I know whose ability it is to be able to deliver it. And then I've trusted that person's ability, but because I have previously seen it, experienced it, and felt that I know this guy can do it. Now that's my equation with that person. And I'm taking that call because of that. When you come
Right.
fresh to me and I have no experience of how this will work, I will need to hedge my bets, at least for the thing that, um, uh, are you, like, have you thought it through? And, we burnt our fingers by actually doing initially when we joined, and we were like, okay, let's pick, like, somebody's got a great idea. The idea was great. So they sent us a 4-pager, said, let's put this into development. We do take 3 months on the contract. 6 months later, we are struggling, and I call that development hell, because you just go into a zone where you're unable to tell us where that story is actually going to go. And even with us putting in effort, saying, do you want extra help? Should we get this? Should we do that? It is a writer's room. If it comes from a vision, either it is the writer's really strong vision or a showrunner's really strong vision. They have a vision of what this show is about, and then they're able to pull that through, and they know what to do. And my job then becomes super easy. It's very easy for me then, because my job then is like shepherding and throw either udhar karke, make sure that if it's flagging, if it's dragging, thoda ye hai, thoda character thoda off ho gaya, can we change it? This is similar to another show that I have. Let's not go down this path. Then makes my job easier. Otherwise, I am always scared if I have to get way involved in a thing, that means that there is trouble.
So if you're a newer or a fresher,
yeah, you don't want Rohit Prakash running around telling you how you should be writing your show.
So if you're a newer or a fresher writer, it's better to have more to bring on the table to give you a better sense of.
I think
Yeah.
with anyone, it's just that at least, like, there is somebody who's come to me with a 30-page story, but it was so clear in the 30 pages what they wanted to do, how they wanted this thing, where it was going to end, what that story was about. That person's made another show, and I was like, okay, this person we know where he'll go. We understand how his mind works, and we know how he will this thing. And with the more we talk about it, the more we discuss it. And we had ups and downs in this thing. I couldn't understand his outline. I just said, this is not making any sense. It's falling flat. He said, you're a grammar teacher. You're taking a red pen and circling my script with this thing. I was like, yeah, fair. I am kind of doing that. Then we decided, okay, you write the pilot and then we'll see. And if the pilot works great, then you're right, I'm wrong. If it doesn't work, I don't know what's going to happen. He wrote a pilot, it was fantastic. I shut up and I said, okay, you go ahead. But whoever is writing it out, you need to know whether you're an old hand at it, new person at it, you need to know where the story is going. If you can explain it very well in 15 pages, sure. If you can do it in 70 pages, fair enough. But you need to have thought it. Like, I'm listening to these stories, and Aranya came to us 10 episodes written now. Then Charu and this, and they already had plans, and we gave some comment that episode 7 mein issue hai. Charu, I think, knew we were going to point that out, had a solution in his mind, and told us there and then this is what we will do to it. I think when I'm listening to Umesh, he also said that he had this idea and then he started to build on it. He had written it out on his own. He had put this in. Same thing in Anahita. This is how actually it's happening. Like this, it's not like Netflix mein main aisa ek 4-page ka concept dalunga and then hum writers room karenge and magically we'll have a 8-episode come out at the end of 12 months. It's not going to be like that. If it's a 4-pager, it's probably going to get stuck in the 6th month. We're going to realize it's not going anywhere, and 7th month we're going to have to take a decision to close it. It's when the person with the vision and the writers, and it is hard work. It's extremely hard work. It's easy for me to read someone else's work and say yes, no, and it's brutal. But the thing is that unfortunately now that's how the cards are rolled. But we have to decide like what we need to make, and we've learned from our experiences what we need to do to get those made. So we put those into practice.
Right. Makes sense, Rohit. And I think even from a writer's point of view, it makes more sense to go in with the least amount of risk and the most amount of clarity, because obviously everybody's investing their time in the project, right? So the more clarity you have at the outset of your journey, the better. So, well, this was a really stimulating discussion, I have to say. And it's time for us to now get into the Q&A section of our members. And we'll begin with something which is a technical question and from a directorial point of view. So I think Charudat and Umesh, you are both welcome to answer. So somebody has asked me how much of, first of all, like should blocking in a scene be included in a spec script or should it be left to the director? So just for the benefit of our members, if you could begin by explaining what is a blocking thing and how much of it should a writer do?
If by blocking you mean choreographing the scene and how the actors are going to move, then I would say writers should never ever even attempt to do that. In fact, when I get a script to direct, which I have not written, I want to erase all the stage directions which are there, unless they are very necessary. So when you have this character's name and in the columns, in the hypothesis, you say that very angry, in a cold tone. So I would not do that, because that is where I work with my actors. It's a writer should stop writing, stage directions, choreography, never ever in the final script at least. While he is thinking about in his initial drafts, if he wants to visualize the complete scene, then it's okay. Then, and if he intends to direct it himself, and there's a particular note which he's writing to himself as a director, not as a writer, but later which he's going to use as a director when he's handling the scene, that makes sense. But I would definitely, refrain from writing all these stage directions, choreography, while I'm doing my final draft of the script, because that is one thing where it's a very collaborative effort, and we definitely start with the initial idea of the writer and the way the story and the scenes have been fleshed out. But when we take it to the actors and when the director is discussing the scene with the actors, there are so many things which come out, and I would not like a writer to sort of make it the process restrictive by giving such instructions. I would like the actors and the directors to interpret and reinterpret the scene themselves, and then to visualize it according to their, creative thought and the process, and arrive at a choreographed scene or the tone or the character voice. So I think that I leave to the writer, to the director and the actors, and the writer should definitely refrain from giving these kind of stage directions.
Yeah, I pretty much I'm in line with the same thing, that we are writers. We have to create. We have to. There's an invisible soul and there's a visible skeleton. This is my job to give the team an invisible soul and a skeleton. So if
Right.
anybody wants, and if you see, this is a question that must have come from a relatively new writer, because it's not a question. Experienced writers will not do it. It's not professional also. But you must just read up scripts. There are so many great scripts available online. Some of the world's best scripts you see, there is hardly no camera movement, no short descriptions, no too many parentheses. Just, and it's a rigorous training to yourself, that how can you still create that image, or at least a semblance of that image for the director. And it's not, this is a director, there's a cameraman, there's a production designer, there's a producer who's going to budget things. So
Yeah.
let's not, so bus it up, you create that thing and then let the other teams take over. It's a completely collaborative process. And if at all, if you at some point of time want, see, it's good that writers, if they can attend a table read, for example. When a table reading is happening, you sit down, make a note, and quietly go and tell the director or something that this is what I intended, in case there's some loss in translation. Beyond that, I don't think a writer should ever. It's not his turn.
Also, it leads to overwriting, I believe, which is never fun to read. So yeah.
Yeah, unnecessary. Like
Yeah,
color of curtains, describing the houses. When you read sometimes new writers, they come in, especially people who come from literary backgrounds. They write all these. See, writing doesn't require any flowery language. If you just write that
Yeah.
posh house, they write an upper middle class Mumbai flat. That's it. You know that after that, what kind of fridge is there, or what kind of thing, until the fridge is going to explode, or there's going to be a body inside it, then you describe the fridge. अदरवाइज क्या है, फ्रिज तो फ्रिज है, वो प्रोडक्शन डिजाइनर और डायरेक्टर सोचेगा ना कि वो फ्रिज कैसा होना चाहिए, कैमरा अंदर घुस पाता नहीं, पीपल राइट अबाउट कैमरा इज इनसाइड द फ्रिज, अरे भाई you open the door, you can see that. So yeah,
Right.
Stage direction में मतलब ये, and Charu is right when he talks about the refrigerator and the camera being inside the refrigerator, but there might be some interesting detail which the writer has in mind. For example, I remember I was writing a web series, and I had this Sada gentleman, a character in the web series, and I wanted to show him using Godrej hair dye because it was so typical of that Delhi ka mahal, which I wanted to say. So that was one instance when I really wanted that brand to be used. But again, as Charu rightly said, I was actually exercising more of my directorial rights than my writers, responsibilities when I was writing that. But yeah, sometimes when you're writing for your own self, these kind of minor details you can write them as your personal notes if you intend to direct it yourself,
Sure.
because it adds to the character which you as a director have in mind.
Yeah, and I think a very common situation in which people get confused about how much to describe is when you're creating an action sequence, for instance, or a sports sequence, where how much should I mention this character is doing, that character is doing, how much is too much, how much should I leave to the action director or the whatever, the sports director. So yeah, I think, but like you're saying, less is more, and let the director and the technicians have their own take on it. Got it. So another question which I feel is relevant for this panel, considering almost all of us have TV experience, is that what is the difference? This is again from a member, that the basic differences between writing for a web series and writing for television versus writing a film, like the grammar and the challenges, like how do they differ?
I think
This
we have
question is for the
already
whole panel.
I think we have already spoken about it,
Yeah.
and Anahata and Charu have very
Yeah.
vividly put the differences across film. Like Charu said, that mostly generally it's a given practice that we write films in 3 acts, and that there is a certain process and what is expected are the different elements of the 3 acts, and which is again on the web, and anyone can go and read about that. And the difference, the main primary difference, is in the time you get to narrate your story. And as they rightly said, that the secondary characters and their plot lines become so much more important. So for me, if you're comparing it with the film format, then in the web series, if the first episode pilot is Act 1, that majorly there is exposition of the characters and their motivations have been set. Then from episode 2 to say episode 6 is a long stretched out Act 2 of the film. And the final payoff is going to be in the Act 3, which will be the last episode of the web series. The only major difference, as they again have already pointed it out, I'm just putting it briefly, is in the web series, because we're looking at binge watching sort of a behavior, it is essential to put a certain kind of a hook. And as Rohit had mentioned, and something which is organic to the story, and not suddenly a bomb rakh diya hai, but something which is an organic to the story, that hook is placed at the end of the episode so that it encourages a sort of a binge watching behavior. And in fact, we go ahead, and at the end of the last episode, we actually give another hook which promises of a second season. So these are the very typical ways of writing. And you want to add anything to this, Charu, or Anahata, in this?
Yeah, Anata can go. I think she gets the thing.
I like I said, television and OTT, I think the biggest difference is the expectations the viewer has, because I think with television, they're kids, and there's this whole thing of family watching, and there's this whole paradigm which is different from OTT. OTT is also to a great degree, targeting single users, single viewers. And I think that frees up the content to some degree, to a great degree, I would say, because it gives you flexibility to go anywhere with it. And and of course, in terms of form, the story obviously will have to be told differently, because television requires you to have like 50 to 100 episodes of bandwidth for a story, and the story need not even remain the story. It's television has a totally different set of things going on there. Where there is OTT, you have to be very clear about your story. You have to be very clear about, thematically where you're going with it. What is the takeaway from the show? At which point are we flipping it? Why are we doing it? There's a lot of design that is, I think, as an element, design is a huge thing in the writing of OTT, I feel. And because you're kind of, creating a structure which is, in a sense, not to say manipulate, but to kind of, like Umesh said, encourage the viewer to watch more immediately. And that immediacy, I think, is a big difference with OTT.
Yeah, yeah. And one small thing which I would like to just mention, that sometimes what happens is many people, I come across writers and they say, ये OTT subject है, ये OTT subject है, ये film का subject नहीं है, ये television का subject नहीं है, OTT subject है. So then I'm just chatting with that person, explain what is an OTT subject. So inevitably what happens is a bold air. So where you can put in certain amount of sexual content or certain amount of the violence and gali galoch, and you can use language. So I would say that yes, there was initially when all the platforms were coming, there was a certain amount of natural draw. It's like you have been repressed and you want to tell. So you people have gone a little bit overboard with it. But now I think storytelling should slightly become a little bit more mature, and you use things only for the sake of that story and not because it is a requirement of an OTT platform. I think a lot of younger writers should just not think in that way that OTT है तो इसमें हम लोग इसमें भरपूर sex डालेंगे, इसमें भरपूर violence डालेंगे और गाली गलौज करेंगे, because people also people, the viewership is shifting. You are having people who traditionally probably didn't watch content on online platforms. You will have families watching, you will have other, and a large Indian audience is also going to be watching. So why would you turn off somebody, or why would you, if your story didn't require it, if it's not at the core of your story. For example, I was given an example, Bandit Queen cannot be made without the gali. In the beginning, when the little girl turns around and uses the, the gali, why it is. The whole film hinges on that. And nobody ever questions it. But if you are getting into a thing where you are just, like one deluge and thinking that this is going to, yes, you are alienating a lot of your audiences. I'm just saying. So I think we should be a little careful about that.
No, I really agree with what you said, because, there is a perception, and I think writers should avoid that, is that, OTT is the naughty corner. Anyone can go and do whatever they like. Whereas really, I feel that OTT offers us the form to be able to, like I said, explore how deeply you want to tell the story, to what depth you want to take this viewing experience. Because in OTT, the viewing experience becomes very focal. Like I said, the writing, the storytelling becomes very focal. So in that sense, I feel that it has to be given the respect that it really deserves. And I feel that India is a culture where stories, listening, telling, it's a big thing. Oral traditions have been a big thing in India. Everyone responds to stories. And ultimately, it cannot be that we are kind of pushing people away. Like you said, there may be a segment of people who are just like, who wants to go there? And that shouldn't be the appeal.
Yeah.
Don't do it just for the sake of, sensationalization.
It is not something that really is going to keep people hooked for eight episodes.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
It has to be insightful. It has to bring something to the experience.
Yeah. For me, it was a very interesting sort of a thing which happened, because there were a lot of times when we as writers wanted to write about something. It could have been something political or something religious or something. So we were immediately told that you cannot make this for television, or you can also not make it for the films, because there are a lot of repercussions, and things can go wrong, and commercially as well as otherwise. So when OTT came in, suddenly there was this feel that up till now the subjects we have not been talking about and seriously want to talk about, we will now get an opportunity to talk about those subjects and treat them in the way we want to treat them, because now a certain platform is available. And so we did see, while I do agree there was a sort of a euphoria and everyone went overboard writing abuses and everything, but certainly there was a major shift in the terms of content and in terms of treatment, which was very apparent when we were watching the new content on the OTT. So those are very exciting times. But everyone has wisened up. We have also realized that OTT is not the promised heaven. Also, it's OTT too has its own reservations and limitations. So now everyone is settling down. But certainly OTT gave us a space as a writer to think at least of certain ideas which we could have never even imagined to do for television or films. So that way it became a very exciting possibility for us. Yes, we did went overboard and became euphoric, wrote a lot of galis, but now I think everyone is like wisening up and settling down, calming down, calm down. You know.
I think that can really that is shifting mostly because I think the focus is also going towards quality of content. That somewhere I think we are realizing that too much of anything is just a bunch of trash. So ultimately, you have to be able to curate good ideas, tell them well, bring it to the table looking pretty and good, and making you happy at the end of the day that you watch something fun, you couldn't stop yourself. That is the idea, is to create quality content. Whereas I think there was this whole perception where we felt, okay, let's go. It's mad out there. That not gone.
Touche. So, okay. So I think all of us are on the same page with regard to that don't just do it for the sake of whatever sensationalization and everything. And as long as it's organic, it's fine. So another technical question from members. So first of all, for those members who have joined in later, there's no set format for a web series or a film on an OTT platform. Like, for instance, Aranyak was written by Charudat, who was the series writer on that. It was one writer. Whereas Ye Kali Kali Aankhein was written by Anahata, who was the story writer, and they also had a screenplay writer and a dialogue writer. So it varies. It's not a rigid thing, कि ऐसा ही होना है. But when it comes to writers' rooms, and working in one, our members want to know what are the do's and don'ts. So the question is primarily directed at Rohit, because you must have a lot of experience of dealing with writers' rooms and teams as such. So what is your take? Like what to avoid and what qualities are looked for in a writer, other than the writing skill, of course, when he's part of such a setup?
Yeah, so honestly, I'm actually the wrong guy for this question, because the way we do it is it's the showrunner, the producer, the teams themselves, and we don't get into the writer's room. Like, they may introduce us to the writers, and then we'll, we may recommend someone if they ask for it. We don't step into the writer's room, and then we're not sitting with them, and we're not bouncing ideas, etc., etc. That only comes in like if they sent us a draft or a Bible or something, and then we want to discuss our notes with them, then that's actually when we meet the writer's room, or we'll try and just meet them, but socially, like, just hang out, we get to know each other, and then they go and do their thing, all the thrashing out and stuff. I think the only, there are a couple of schools of thoughts on writers' rooms, because there are some writers showrunners who feel that I'll do everything and I don't need a writer. I don't need a room, because writers' rooms are full of faff. Everyone just talks to each other and nobody does any work. I've heard that. There are other people who feel that, and I have seen the power of writers' rooms, where I've seen like how ideas get like amplified and solutions come up. And a lot of the times, as a creative exec, I'll just say like, this part's not working, and can we maybe suggest, can we do this? I'll sneak in a sneaky suggestion. And they'll come back with a completely different thought, which addresses the problem, but just makes that screenplay or that part of the screenplay fantastic. And I think that's the power of writer's room, because if it's set up really well and they're open, they feel safe to talk. It's not like I have to pander to the senior most person and therefore meri koi aukaat nahi, main kyun bolu kuch, koi meri sunega nahi. If that, you can create a safe space, you can create like free-flowing ideas, and then the leader of that room can structure that time so that it's not being like frittered away in just conversation and this thing, but there's actually done with a purpose. I see great things come out of it. And I've worked on feature film scripts, and I'm blown away with series writing that comes out of individuals or writers' room, but blown away by it.
Great. So does anybody want to pitch in on the question, or?
I'll just add to that I think writing is for some it's a calling, for some it's a skill, for some it's a professional choice, for some it's amusement. It can be anything that drives you to writing. And I feel a writer who develops things on their own, or whether it's a writer's room, it requires people who are stimulated by the idea of triggering each other's imagination. So finally it can be a potent experience if, that exchange is amazing. At the same time, writing in solitude has its own power. So I feel that it depends on the subject, and it depends on the, the configuration of the arrangement that you are getting into professionally. So in the case of Ye Kali Kali Aankhein, it was an idea that Goldie and I have been talking about for 20 years. So it was kind of, natural that we were on it. And there was Varun, who was, who was going to do the dialogues, and we were all sitting together, and we were, there was, when you have clarity as creative people, that ki yahan se, whatever we do, what we take out of it has to be, really meaningful and fun. You will arrive at it, hopefully. But I think it doesn't dismiss the solitary writer's experience, because developing a whole project in solitude through the vision of one person is also as powerful.
I have one.
Ultimately, it's art.
Yeah. I have one. See, while I on Aranyak, I was the sole writer. I am on another room. I've been a part of couple of rooms, And what I would like to tell newer writers, or when you are in a room, see, the thing is, it is a misnomer that solitary writing does not happen in a room. There are discussions happen, but you go back and write. You have to. You take homework. You go and you have to write and come back. And so it's not like people are just sitting and talking and fighting. No, and it can be very interesting when there are variety of views. But as Rohit correctly pointed out, the showrunner has to manipulate, has to control and effectively control and efficiently manage the time and break down the process. In this week we will cover this. In 1 month we have to hit this mark. So you have to be very disciplined. You have to be disciplined. And another thing is trust. You have to, even if you may not have a great friendship with that person, or you may not have a great social life or whatever. Abhi to khair, COVID mein kahe ka social life. But I'm saying you in a space, you have to respect that you are in a team. If you're playing in a football team, you have to pass the ball. You have to let the other person score a goal, and you have to cheer. You have to encourage each other. Without that, if you get into egos and so stay within it, or again, if you are a junior writer and say no, I will be nobody is going to do that. So it's an interesting space to grow, and for committed, for established writers, it's a great place to understand what younger people are thinking and how the world is functioning. So, and it's also fun to do some things together. Exercises like watching.
Yeah. There's so much of so many perspectives that you hear. There's so many things you don't know about reality.
Absolutely,
it's very illuminating, I have to say.
Yeah. So it's good. It can be very good.
Yeah. Great. So I think we are almost done with the session. Of course, it was a great one. And for the members who joined in late, we have an FB Live on our SWA page, which is accessible. We also have it on our YouTube page. So you can access the whole thing there. And a lot of your questions were answered probably in the first half of the discussion as well. So be sure to check it out. And regarding the number one frequently asked question, how to pitch to Netflix, just Google it. Every producer, every OTT platform, everyone has their own set of submission guidelines and requirements, and everything is available online these days. So my advice to our members is please do the online research, and I'm sure you'll come across with your answers there. So I guess that's about it. And wrapping up this discussion, I first want to thank all of you on behalf of SWA for taking out the time to be here with us today and helping out our members. And we really appreciate it. So thank you so much. Rohit, Charudat, Umesh, Anahata, it was great having you on board. And I'm sure our members also appreciate the gesture. So thank you so much. And please have a great evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye for me and my co-writers.
Have a great weekend, guys.
Bye. Have a